Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Last Sunday, we took a reassuring look in the rearview mirror, as we say, to survey the many kinds of service that our congregation is or has been involved in over time. Today, I would suggest that a successful congregational vision also includes a look forward through the windshield of our church life as well, to try to visualize what effective vistas of service might still lie ahead for us as well, to stimulate our imaginations and hopefully to guard against the distractions or the apathy that often prevents churches from experiencing all of the opportunities and the blessings that await them in their future work. So I invite you to join me at the mountaintop for a look into the promised land, if you will, of what Eden's future might hold with God's direction and with his blessing. To dream a bit together about some additional possibilities that could enhance our outreach to people around us who may be searching for something more than what they already have. As we observe the human spirit in action in the world, I am convinced that there is an innate, God-given urge to progress and to grow in life, the need to learn and to conquer unexplored new frontiers. If you ask a mountain climber why they must climb that particular mountain, he or she will probably say, because it's there. To go to Mars, because we can. Or to conquer cancer, because we must. Be fruitful and multiply, God commanded Adam and Eve. Or to Abram, my friend, there is much more out there than you can imagine. Just get up and get going. Moses, let my children go and help them to move on to the land of milk and honey. And Joseph, it won't be easy, but follow your dreams. The same to you, David, my future giant killer. And to you, Daniel, I'll help you take the heat. Oh, Esther, risk your very life to save your people from extinction. Ruth, you'll be blessed by following your mother-in-law to Bethlehem. And Saul, I have a job for you that no one else can do like you could if you'll become apostle number 13. Now, my friends, I am very much aware that this human need to scale new heights is often driven by unbelievably horrific and selfish motives, as with the Tower of Babel, for example, or countless other evil schemes. But consider also the accomplishments of the first century church as energized by Pentecost. The indomitable drive of early Anabaptists seeking to model a faithful church in a cruel world. And the historic contributions of hundreds of pioneer Christian ministries contributing to the overall progress of the human race. Multitudes of daring Christians who harnessed their curiosity and their God-given drive to attempt the extraordinary and to advance the work of the kingdom of God. As Mennonites, we may not think in such ambitious terms often enough, but I am personally ashamed when real-life stories on TV or in the cinema have to remind us of the power of simple encouragement to change people's hearts and lives, and how creative efforts to excel and to give to others can revolutionize people's lives in so many ways, especially when God is the motivating force. After all, isn't this kind of life improvement what the gospel and the church are really all about? Which is why I was struck by Philip Yancey's recent book entitled Vanishing Grace, Whatever Happened to the Good News, and his concern about why the gospel is being so widely ignored and rejected as the answer to today's lack of meaning and fulfillment in life, and to people's desperate and unfulfilled search for genuine belonging and community. I reference some of Yancey's thought-provoking observations from his research in my lead article for this month's Eden Echoes, including the 5 frequent criticisms from people who have left the church. A, that Christians are unwilling to truly listen to them. B, that we are too judgmental. C, that our faith is overly confusing. D, that we've failed to correct what we've already acknowledged to be wrong in the church. And E, that we have not spoken to our time with a credible voice. All of which certainly merit careful attention as we seek to strengthen our ability to reach out to others. But I also believe that some of these can be corrected by what I would call incarnational involvement with others. A real-life, mutual engagement with people to learn who we really are, and then to experience who Christ can be to us. This is what my own quest is probably about at this stage of my life, when my most effective efforts will likely be to try to help encourage those in coming generations to also pursue God's dream for his church along with him. Yancey cites a number of Anabaptist values and Mennonite-related personalities as possible solutions to some of these concerns. The most powerful for me was the story of when Malcolm Gladwell covered a Mennonite funeral for the New Yorker magazine in Winnipeg. Gladwell is the young author of best-selling books like Blink, The Tipping Point, Outliers, and David and Goliath. An insightful writer who dreams big and credits his rediscovery of faith to a life-changing witness during a visit with a Mennonite couple in Canada who lost their daughter to a sexual predator. After the largest manhunt in the city's history, police found the teenager's frozen body in a shed, her hands and feet bound. At a news conference after the funeral, the father said, "We would like to know who the person or persons are so we could share, hopefully, a love that seems missing in these persons' lives." The mother added, "I can't say at this point that I forgive this person," stressing the phrase, "at this point." "We have all done something dreadful in our lives or have felt the urge to," she says. The unusual response of this couple pulled Gladwell back toward his own Mennonite roots. "Something happened to me while I sat in Wilma Dirkson's garden," he says. "It's one thing to read in a history book about people empowered by their faith, but quite another to meet an otherwise very ordinary person in the backyard of a very ordinary house who has managed to do something utterly extraordinary. Their daughter was murdered, and the first thing the Dirksons did was to stand up at a press conference and talk about a path to forgiveness." Then he adds, "Maybe we have difficulty seeing the weapons of the Spirit because we don't know where to look, or because we are distracted by the louder claims of material advantage. But I have seen them now, and I will never be the same." This is what I mean by incarnational Christianity, faith with skin on it, shared humbly by wounded people in face-to-face encounters, really getting to know each other's hopes and fears, and helping move one another toward the life-changing experience with Christ. When the Apostle John speaks of this, he speaks of experiencing this life-giving word, capital W, as something that we have heard, but we have also seen it with our own eyes. We've actually touched it and handled it and experienced it in real time and real life. So we ask, how can this happen? Through direct contact with someone who has the transforming love of Christ living in and through them. An encounter that brings purpose, community, and identity through regular contact with other believers, with God, and with the church. To help make this happen in our unique time, Yancey calls for three kinds of Christians to help facilitate this new way forward. Ideas and approaches to plant in our minds for future reflection, with hopes that they will help open new doors to people's lives through what he calls holy subversion. Yancey approaches this concept by reiterating the mutual fear between Christians and society in today's setting. The secular world that views Christians as a form of morals police and themselves as victims of Christian judgment. And Christians, on the other hand, who view themselves as a harassed minority, holding out against these evil forces hostile to religion in order to avoid martyrdom. A mutual distortion that calls for a new approach that will help disarm both sides and open the door to humble and safe conversation. This attempt to tell all the truth, but to tell it slant, is a technique that is strongly recommended by Eugene Peterson because he said this was Jesus' method in his frequent use of parables and metaphors in his teaching. An approach that calls for three new kinds of participants for our day, Yancey says. The first of these is the role of the pilgrim, someone who will take the courage to strike out on a new and different path all alone if need be. But here's the difference, but to do so without the fanfare of one perceived as a troublemaker. A new kind of leader who bears the news as that of a humble pilgrim, not a haughty power broker. Such a pilgrim acknowledges that he or she is also a sick patient who has found a remedy and wants to introduce it to others. The second group are his activists who will join the cause and look for every opportunity to minister to those in trouble because, he says, every Christian can be an activist, whether full or part-time. People subversively acting out their beliefs by quietly going against the grain of the surrounding culture. Now that's a tenet that most of us are familiar with but find hard to live out. When parents discard unwanted children, he says, Christians make a home for them. When politicians cut funding for the poor, Christians open shelters and feeding stations. When law enforcement confines criminals behind bars, Christians run programs for them. And that by turning down the volume, these efforts will have an effect on society long after we are gone. And then finally, the third group, which is the artists. Because Yancey believes that this may be one of the most subversive tactics of all, of which our Ugandan children's choir, the Muppets, mime, art, or powerful literature like Victor Hugo's Les Miserables are all excellent examples. Herein, I believe, lies a unique challenge, especially for our younger generation, who understand today's values and who have a gift of creative, artistic expression. When we first visited Amsterdam in the middle of the 1970s, it was youth with a mission who could gather an audience for sacred drama in the midst of a city that had already been made highly secularized. The advocacy group with which I toured Israel-Palestine 4 years ago repeatedly heard the same theme. Come to us with art, cinema, music, and you will have an audience. Although I had the dreams for these kinds of things, I regret that I didn't always have the self-confidence or the encouragement to risk and to fill the role of the pilgrim that Yancey is seeking. But I have known and I have worked with many people who have modeled these methods already with great success, and I think my challenge is to dare us to perhaps change or set aside some of our prejudices for the sake of the gospel and dare us to try some of these things that he is recommending. Nor am I the creative gifted artists who can help craft ministries that dissolve these barriers between believers and seekers through literature, cinema, dance, sports, or the like. But I continue to dream with those who have the curiosity and the talents to be mightily used of God, especially if we as parents and elders will encourage them to hone their skills and to use them for the work of the kingdom, whatever the cost may be. And for all the rest of us, that middle group of activists who make things happen will provide ample opportunity for us to do our part and to effectively share our own stories of faith with others in a non-threatening environment. Our Sunday school classes have already started a list of things that we might still add to our repertoire for the future. And I believe that all of these things are part of God's dream for the church and for this church as well. So I want to end this message basically by reviewing the list that you have in this little, is that violet or purple or whatever the color, blue insert that you have in the bulletin, and to encourage you to call the office or to speak to one of us as pastors and add to this list that came to us from our Sunday schools in a similar way that we had the list last week of what we were already doing. And we do not want in this list to take away from all of the faithful work that is being done inside this church by so many faithful workers for a long time and with great sacrifice. But here are some ideas that were given. Take a Sunday off to visit another church to appreciate each other's worship and report what we learned. I think curiosity is really important, and to see what other people are doing. We don't have all the answers ourselves. Take a Sunday off to go out and do service projects for others in our community as a witness of love. Hillsboro, I believe, has 7 or 8 churches. I think Mound Ridge has 5, if I'm not mistaken. And some of their work days on Sundays have coincided with others, and they have had 3 and 4 churches out canvassing the community, doing acts of love for different people on a Sunday morning. And it was featured in the Free Press at one point. So this is one that I think we could seriously consider doing. Ramp up our availability for service to our local community. Maintenance, cleanup, driving for shopping, transportation to the doctor, and even helping just listen during a medical consultation if requested. I think sometimes it's hard for us to follow all the, it's not legalese, it's medicalese, isn't it, that we hear in the doctor's office. Set up a hotline at the office to provide information on such services and help arrange for the same. A program of summer meals for kids similar to what Trinity Mennonite Church successfully did this past summer in Hillsboro. They got a grant from Western District, they canvassed the downtown area, and they fed, I think, a couple of hundred kids all summer long at the church who would not have had a good meal when school was not in session. Help foster nonprofit organizations in Hutchinson, and it says here, see Katie Gilmore, and I think that whoever wrote this down probably says Katie has some ideas on this, so keep that in mind. Help Christina Graber raise scholarships for Cradle to Crayons families, and there might be other ways in which we could help there. Serve and support the Mount Hope Sanctuary. Is that a sanctuary for women? It is, okay, in McPherson. Partner more with Valley Hope. There's a question mark there, but I think that to reach out to Valley Hope would not be a bad idea. Cooperative youth outreach with activities after games and other activities for them in the summer. I sat and visited with some kids at Mods one time, and I even sent Pastor Derek over there after that just to have a cup of coffee with him. Because there were about 4 or 5 or 6 kids who were saying, we just don't have anything to do in the summertime. And I think they would be willing to even do service as I was visiting with them. Expand our range of involvements and ministries at Pine Village. And certainly I'm sure there is room for that. A coffee shop, set up someplace for young adults to congregate, similar to the one in Valley Center and also in Inman. The one that's being established in Valley Center, I believe, is a community thing, although churches are involved. I believe the one that is being set up in Inman is sponsored mainly by the Bethel Church, but probably some other churches in that area as well. Backside. More Sunday school options, especially for college agers and in-betweeners. I feel like an in-betweener sometimes. I'm not sure whether I'm employed or whether I'm retired. So maybe that's for me as well. Expand Becky King's ministry in the Mound Ridge school system. That is a tremendous ministry. I don't know whether there's room for expansion, but it was listed, all right? A community sing-along and or an inspirational community event with special speaker, etc. We attended when Brenda Matthews was here a number of years ago, and I'm wondering if that's what people had in mind. Host a high school prom or after prom event. Perhaps survey the town to learn who is our neighbor and establish appropriate ministries accordingly. Learn what neighboring communities and churches are doing to reach out to those who live there. And again, gathering ideas, and we have many people who are members here, but who have residence and who are much involved in some other towns around this area, and we are aware of that commitment as well, but maybe they have some ideas that we could use. Donate blood. I read recently that the winter storm caused a real blood shortage. I guess that was probably nationally, but probably here too. Help staff the polls on Election Day. An emphasis on the homeless shelters. And someone had mentioned that they had stayed night and like answered the phone or helped at one of the shelters, and this is probably one of the things we could do. And finally, increase our visibility on Black Kettle Days as a holistic, civic-minded church that really cares about the community. I don't think there's not too much that we could be doing just to strengthen rural communities in general. And Roy Kaufman has a very interesting article about rural churches in the Mennonite World Review. I recommend it to you because I've taken his workshops. And I think that that's a challenge that we should not overlook. There are probably more ideas, and I would encourage you to call the office, talk to us, and I would just hope that God would give us a vision for new things in which we could strengthen our outreach and certainly have an incarnational witness to the community and to the world.